I figured it was about time to share some of my final thoughts on V-Log-L for the GH4. Now, I made quite a few videos about V-Log-L when it first came out, when it was first released, and the total fiasco that it was, where you could get it for free through essentially a loophole that then they later patched, and then that whole rollout where you had to pay $100 to get a piece of paper in the mail, and just how once you had it, it wasn't always great, especially if you're recording internally, and how there are oftentimes you don't want to shoot with V-Log-L just because the image quality actually is deteriorated in those cases, and just how the whole kind of thing was very messy at the get-go. And I made a lot of videos talking about that, but I never really did a follow-up video saying kind of some of my final thoughts on it, because I do frequently shoot V-Log-L, but it's only in very specific situations that I would recommend that you do it. Now, what are those situations? Because it's important to know when you want to use it and when you don't want to use it, because there are some benefits to shooting V-Log-L, but a lot of the stuff, my critique of it still stands. So if you're filming internal on the GH4, recording to the SD card in the GH4, I do not recommend you shoot V-Log-L. I think the internal codec doesn't record the colors in the same way that an external one does. Not even just the 8-bit 420 colors, but just the way the colors look in general. And I think it's a lot harder to grade the internal stuff than if you're recording externally. So if you're shooting internal, unless the project doesn't really matter, and you want some of the other benefits of V-Log-L, and you don't really care for the total color accuracy and the flexibility of the grade. But if you're worried about image quality, don't shoot V-Log-L internal. Just stay away from it as a general rule. It will give you more headaches and more problems than it is worth. Now, if you're recording externally, which I do frequently to a Video Assist 4K, you could also use an Atomos Shogun or a Pix E5. There's plenty of external monitors / recorders that do a great job. And if you're recording 10-bit 422 V-Log-L, that is a good situation to use that profile, because you do get the benefit of the 2 extra stops of dynamic range. And I haven't tested it scientifically to know if it's actually 2 more stops, but you do get more dynamic range than you do with any of the other picture profiles on the GH4. So if you are filming in a harsh contrast environment, or you need the absolute most dynamic range possible, if you record externally, shoot V-Log-L, it's going to give you the most flexibility. And I also really like the way it renders colors from the shadows to the highlights, and just kind of the smoothness in that color palette. And you can obviously tweak that with some LUTs or some color grading after the fact. You absolutely have to if you're going to be shooting any kind of log, whether it's on the GH4 or any other camera that shoots log. You're going to have to do some color grading to it, so be prepared for that post-production work. But if you're interested in log shooting, you should probably know that anyway. With that ability, you get more flexibility with the color grading, so you can do some stuff that you can't do with Cinelike D or Cinelike V or Portrait or some of the other profiles that come standard on the GH4. If you're recording internally, use those profiles, because they give you a pretty good look, kind of baked into the footage, and you can have a little bit of flexibility. Oftentimes when I'm shooting internally, I use Cinelike V, and I'll do that in situations where I don't want to spend a lot of time in post-production. So like right now, I'm not shooting log because I don't feel like spending a lot of time coloring my YouTube videos. So I'll shoot Cinelike V on the GH4 internal, and that gets me pretty close to where I want. Maybe I'll tweak it a little bit, but maybe not too much after there. Also, if it's a situation where there's not a huge dynamic range, it's very beneficial to have the smaller file sizes that you get internally with the GH4 than you would get with ProRes recorded externally. So if you're working in a very controlled environment, and you know the kind of look that you're going for, and you don't always need that flexibility, or you're just filming a lot, like it might be the case that you're filming a documentary or something like that, and you need hours and hours of B-roll and footage to shoot all of that log, and then to go back and have to color all of those shots, could be quite a challenge. Now, there's some things you could do in terms of how you shoot to make sure that maybe you just apply the same LUT and you kind of get the same look across everything as a starting point. That may work for you, but some cases you're filming so much content that just coloring all of it to the extent that you would need to with log footage may not be worth it, and that's up for you to decide what's worth it. I do like shooting Vlog L though, when I know I want to spend some time doing some color and making the absolute best looking image as possible, and when I need that dynamic range and when I can record externally. It's great in those settings. Now the thing to know about Vlog L, the kind of way they're squeezing those extra 2 stops from 10 stops from the normal picture profiles to 12 that they say you get with Vlog L, is they are lifting the shadows quite a bit. So people will complain that Vlog L is really noisy, and it is very noisy if you don't bring those shadows back down. And essentially all you're getting there is, rather than a sharp ramp off into those blacks, you can smooth it out a little bit and kind of pick where you want that noise floor to be. Do you want the noise to be a little bit more apparent because maybe it's gonna go through some compression for YouTube anyway, and a lot of that's gonna get hidden? Or maybe you kind of like the look of the noise and think it's kind of like film grain, so maybe you want it for that case. But do know that a good chunk of that extra dynamic range it's going to be in those shadows, lifting them up. And that's kind of essentially what dynamic range is anyway. It's, you know, you can set your clipping point for those highlights, but then how deep into the shadows can you actually see? And that gives you kind of your full range, because, you know, the highlights roll off a little nicer in Vlog L, but the extra dynamic range is really coming from those shadows. And you'll notice right off the bat, if you underexpose something with Vlog L, it is gone. So what I tend to do, just as a check, is I'll switch to one of the other picture profiles, because they're usually pretty close in terms of exposure. So the GH4 doesn't have any LUT monitoring built into it. And unfortunately, the Video Assist 4K does not support LUTs currently either. So that's awesome. Blackmagic, you really should fix that. I keep tweeting at you, and you definitely need to fix that. But in any case, you can switch to one of the other picture profiles. So like I'll use Cinelike V as example. I'll be setting everything up in Vlog L, switch to Cinelike V just to kind of check and make sure all my colors and exposures and everything is kind of right around where I want it to be. It's also very helpful to have a gray card, an 18% gray card, so you can dial in exposure intentionally rather than just looking at the monitor and guessing. Now, with a lot of the other picture profiles, there's enough contrast and you can kind of see the final product, so you can look at an LCD screen or a monitor and it's pretty accurate to what it's going to be once you finalize that video. However, Vlog L and any kind of log shooting is not the same. You may look at it and it may look great, but then you pull into the computer later and it turns out you underexposed everything by a stop or 2 stops or 3 stops in some cases, because these monitors, you know, it looks great, you can see everything, but it's so flat and washed out that you can't tell you're way underexposed. So definitely check your histograms. If you don't know how to read a histogram, you need to learn. I love to shoot Vlog L a little bit overexposed, as long as I'm not clipping those highlights. And you do have to be aware that Vlog L clips around 80% for the highlights and clips around 20% for the shadows. So a normal range that you would see on any other histogram or any other camera would be 0 to 100, and at 100 it's clipping white, and at 0 it's clipping black. That is not the case with Vlog L. It's around 20% and 80%. So on some monitors you'll see you can't use that whole histogram to the right and the left. So just be aware of that. It's something to keep in mind. Your highlights will clip, but they'll look gray. Same thing with your shadows. They won't be full black. They'll be like a dark gray. Now, if you know how to read a histogram and you know they should overexpose it just a little bit without blowing out those highlights, that will give you a really clean image, keeping stuff out of the shadows where it tends to be noisier, and you'll hopefully have something that's a lot nicer to grade in terms of, I like the way Vlog L renders skin tones and just the overall the look of the colors and how they blend. I think Cinelike V and Cinelike D are okay. I prefer Cinelike V, but I know there's a lot of people who like Cinelike D, but I do like log the most. Across pretty much most cameras, log, I just like that look. Maybe it's become just so popular because all these cameras offer it, so now it's kind of baked into everything that you see nowadays. But I like that look. So having Vlog L in certain situations is a handy tool to have. So it's not total garbage. If you want to pay the $100 to get it on the GH4, you'd have my recommendation, as long as you have some kind of external recorder to take care of the codec problem that you have internally with the GH4. But what I'm really hoping most of all is that with the GH5 coming out, it's going to have internal 10-bit 422 color. If it has that, it should have Vlog L standard. You shouldn't have to pay for a firmware upgrade or anything. I think the GH5 should come with log as a standard right out of the box. Pretty much every Sony mirrorless camera is doing this now. They have S-Log 2 and S-Log 3 on pretty much all of the Sony cameras. So I don't know why Panasonic went the firmware upgrade route with the GH4, but I don't think they should do it for the GH5. Because you have that high quality codec built right into the body, it should also come with the benefit of having V-Log L. Now, I will say, I think there's some room for improvement with V-Log L and with the GH cameras in general. I think dynamic range is absolutely important. 12 stops is good, but 14 or 15 would be far better. But also that issue of the 20% to 80% range, I think that should be upgraded. So I don't know if it's a V-Log L version 2 or a different variant of it. I know that screws with all the LUTs, but there are so many LUTs floating around from all sorts of different places, and a slight upgrade to the log codec on the GH5 would be so nice, so that you don't have to deal with that odd 20% 80% clipping. It seems like a total unnecessary thing. There's people who talk about that actually hurts image quality performance because you're working with less bits. I don't know about all that and how all that works. I'll believe people when they say it, but I just think the convenience factor of having 0 to 100 makes a lot more sense than 20 to 80, because as far as I know, it's the only camera and profile to do that, at least any common one that I'm aware of. So having some kind of upgraded variant of V-Log L would be really nice. I mean, Sony's done it. They have S-Log 2 and then S-Log 3. Who knows, maybe there'll be an S-Log 4 at some point. So I think if Panasonic wants to upgrade V-Log L, that would be very nice on the GH5. And just having it come standard. I don't want to deal with paid firmware upgrades, shipping a piece of paper in a box. It's totally unnecessary. Bake it in right from the beginning. Have it in body, in the camera. We got the codec to use it now, so I really hope that ends up being the case.